Welcome everyone to my first video of this school year to let you know about domain and range. We're going to be talking about functions and we're going to be going into that. So this will be our first unit and our first set of instructions. I hope you find this informative and enjoy this. Today what I want you to learn, or what I want you to get, is to determine domain and range and be able to express it in a variety of ways. So this is stuff that you should already know, domain and range, and we can go kind of from there. What we're going to do is, with the domain, you should know that it's a set of x values in a relation. The range is a set of y values in a relation. We're going to talk about continuous mainly here today, but I am going to mention discrete right now in the notes. Connected set of values in a relation. So that means usually our connected graphs and things like that. Discrete, we'll come back to it later, but it's basically an unconnected set of points. I should have put their set, but I didn't. So like when you see a bunch of points plotted all over the place, it's like a scatter plot, that usually is more of a discrete information. We'll talk more about that later, but we're going to mainly focus on continuous today. Okay, so moving on. So here's your first example. I want to list my domain and my range. Okay, there's a couple of different ways to show this. One is just to do the normal notation, and then we're going to talk about interval notation. But domain is the x values, which means it concerns itself from left to right. So we're worried about going from, say, left to right. And then you can start off, if you do normal domain and range notation, express, write it correct normally, then you can start off like this with the squiggly parentheses, that's a set parentheses, put an x between two inequalities, because you're saying x is all the values between those two. Okay, so what's the furthest I go to the left? I go to a -7, and then I go all the way to the right to a +5. Now, notice there is a closed dot at the -7, so that means you should be putting a line underneath to represent closed, that it's equal to. But there's an open dot at the 5, so no line underneath, that would represent not equal to. So we can start at -7, but we get as close to +5 as we possibly can without actually getting to +5. Range, same thing. Notice there that I mentioned about the closed dot being with a line underneath and an open dot not. Okay, so range, you can see my lowest is -3 and my high is 1. Again, I've got a dot there, so I should put a line at the y. Alright, so that's how we've normally done expressing domain and range. But let's add a new thing called interval notation. So interval notation, what is interval notation? Well, hold a second here. I'm going to pop over to this slide. Interval notation describes domain and range of a continuous relations. It is usually expressed using endpoints only. Like, you don't have to say x and y. You could put domain, like you just fill in the blank at the domain and range like that. But you're doing just the endpoints, and you're saying either using parentheses or brackets. Okay, so to go back to the previous example, you can see here, we're again still at -7 and +5. So I would put those two endpoints, -7, +5. And then if it's like a closed dot, you put a bracket. So on the left side for the -7, it's a closed dot, so I'm going to put a bracket. But on the right side, it's an open dot. So that means I'm going to put parentheses. Okay? So open dots are parentheses, closed dots give me brackets. Same with the range. I'm going to start with the low and put here -3 and 1. So notice I'm putting the endpoints, and then since the lowest point is closed, I'll put a bracket, and the highest point is open, I will put a parentheses. And there you go. So that is how we can describe the domain and range in what is called interval notation. So now for the rest of the examples, I'll do both types of expressions, or both types of writing. Okay, so on this next one, what happens if there's only one endpoint? Okay, in other words, you've got an arrow going off somewhere. Well, if you can see here, this is the normal notation for domain and range, and I'm going to put here the idea, look, it starts at 0, and then the arrow means it's going forever and ever and ever to the right, which is going out to infinity and beyond. Just infinity will work. So then I'll put there infinity. Now, there is another way you could write this. It's just saying x greater than 0. But I prefer to always have you express the terms from left to right for me. Okay? I'll discuss it more later, like maybe how the book or quiz or test, if I get it from a different source, would do it differently, but this is kind of how I would like to see it. Interval notation is no different. You would put 0 and infinity. Oh, I forgot to put the line underneath, but there you go. 0 and infinity. And again, since 0 is at the closed dot, that's a bracket. But there will always be a parentheses with infinities. Infinities, either negative or positive, always have parentheses with them. Okay, so that infinity has that parentheses. Range, it starts at 0 and goes up forever. Even though it looks like it's kind of flattening out, it would technically still be going up forever because of that arrow. So range looks pretty much the same. And you can kind of see there. I forgot to put the line underneath because why not? But there you go. So hopefully, you can kind of see how that works. Now, what happens if there are no endpoints and it's just arrows and not the show arrow? That's not what we're worrying about. They're just arrows. All right, so we would graph those arrows. So what does it mean? Well, it means it's going forever to the left and to the right. So that means for the domain, it's going to negative infinity and positive infinity, like forever to the left, forever to the right. You can rewrite that as just saying all real numbers. That's a funky letter R to represent all real numbers. Like you would just say X is, like you would say X, and you would have this little E like this. That means X is all real numbers. Okay, basically that symbols that you see there just say X is all real numbers. Okay, but in interval notation, you wouldn't worry about the all real numbers bit. You would just put negative infinity, positive infinity. So you kind of see why I like to have those notations kind of match up, or those the way you write them match up. And again, since it's infinities, both are parentheses. Notice there is no line underneath either of the inequality symbols. What about the range? Well, the range is a little different. It bottoms out. It reaches a bottom at 0. And then it goes up forever. So I'm not worrying about left and right. I'm worrying about, again, low and high. And on the low point, it stops at 0. And on the high point, it goes up forever, so it's infinity. So you have to be careful that you make note of, does it have like a spot where it could bottom out or top out? Max or min type of thing. So interval notation would be like that, 0 to infinity, and there you go. So I wanted to kind of get you and introduce you to this and wanted to see how y'all do with this. If you have any questions, make sure to ask. I will be there to help and always to answer your questions. That's it for today. Thank you very much.